No, indeed. But we will start, I think, first of all, with the main show, the big game for America's One, this two-legged playoff between the USA Eagles and Los Teros of Uruguay.
That's right.
This first game is taking place this Saturday at 6 p.m. evening local time, which pushes it up to 1 a.m. Sunday morning, our time in the UK, and probably 1 p.m. in the other side of the world, in Australia, New Zealand kind of land.
Which is a reasonable time if you're there with a cup of tea, you can watch a bit of footy.
Sunday afternoon down in Oz, or late night Saturday for us, or just Saturday evening if you're in the US or indeed in Uruguay watching this one. Going to be in Infinity Park in Colorado. Frank Murphy of the IRFU taking the game as referee. Best of luck to him. Peter Martin, also Irish, on one of the AORs, and then Scott Green and Derek Summers, both from the US, as the second assistant and the TMO. It's going to be a serious battle. I mean, it's a real clash of styles. There's an element of unknown to it. These sides haven't played each other since 2019, and the America's Rugby Championship didn't get to take place last year.
Right. Yeah.
And obviously the 2019 pre-World Cup is just a long time ago.
Yeah,
and
a lot of stuff has changed since then.
Indeed. I mean, Uruguay have barely been able to put their squad together, and yet they have had some very positive results. They do have this wonderful offensive style where they move the ball really well. The US, by contrast, a bit slow. We've seen them be stung before, and yet they are extremely physical and at their best extremely efficient once they're close to the line.
Yeah,
in
very
terms of
effective from five out. Yeah, their offensive maul is one of the more effective ones in Tier 2, full stop.
Correct,
And similarly, a lot of their big ball running forwards, guys like Cam Dolan, will be looking to kind of lead from the front and make it a physical game. But Los Teros are not to be underestimated. They had a win earlier this year against Argentina at 15. They did lose one last week against that Argentina 15, but they have some players back for it now as well. They managed to see off Chile in a tight one as well, which leads me to believe the other contests will be juicy as well. But everyone remembers that famous win they had in the World Cup, watershed win in the World Cup over Fiji, that created that great pool where every team got a win in it.
Yes.
So they'll be bolstered by confidence in that. They have a lot of the same personnel in there. Guys like Arata are back into the squad, bolstering them. Freitas captaining. A lot of these guys are familiar faces. And one of the things I remember from that showing in that World Cup, and that game against Fiji particularly, is just defensive organisation and cohesion from a Tier 2 side. I'd never seen quite the like of it, but they held their width and they tackled clean but hard. They were ferocious off the line and physical with it, even though they're quite a slight team in terms of stature, and they'll beat the smaller team on the park. But they're an exciting force, and when they can dial it in and be competent and be cohesive and just be calm in that chaos, then there's scope for them to frustrate this big bullying US side, definitely. Like, there's a brittle confidence there. The US side were rocked out in Canada in the first of their two-legged affair that got them this far. So that's kind of the model for Uruguay as well. It's going to be interesting. As you say, clash of styles. Uruguay definitely the quicker team. US probably the more physical. Who's going to control that? Yeah,
it's interesting. I mean, going back to that World Cup, they matched up pretty well against Fiji. They were able to do that sort of drift defense where once the line break was made, they really did cover. They covered the tracking runners really well, and just their scramble wasn't letting Fiji in, despite Fiji thinking after the line break with their support runners they should be getting in, and then they hustled really hard on the goal line. But then by contrast, they played Georgia a few days later, and Georgia managed to get on top of them at set piece with physicality.
Wrestle control of that tempo. They kept it down and kept it physical.
Exactly right. And that is exactly the kind of team that Gary Gould's US have been and are trying to be. Really efficient at set piece, strong, physical, eat you alive at the scrum, eat you alive at the line out maul, and win the game that way up front.
And the Georgians painted that picture perfectly for them in that World Cup. That is how you beat this Uruguay side, especially if you're Gary Gould's US. It's playing to your strengths, literally. But it remains to be seen how these two stack up, because as you say, we haven't had tape on it since before the World Cup. And that game, notably in 2019, was won comprehensively by Uruguay. And it actually scuppered a load of momentum, positive energy that US were carrying from a great season in 2018, not dissimilar to our own Irish Chargers getting whooped by England at the opening of 2019. The Uruguayans came and absolutely mugged them off in the US with a lot of razzle-dazzle rugby and high-charged offense. So that's definitely, there's scope for that to happen again as well. Like it remains to be seen, but it's one I am intrigued about. These two sides have been playing away in the background, separate from each other, but they're finally clashing as we kind of builded to be. It was always likely that these two were going to be coming head to face for the Americas 1 spot, and here it is.
I know, indeed. The quality of player on show is very interesting as well. I mean, they're in different positions, but there is real quality on both sides. The US have named their team. We haven't got the Uruguayan team as of yet, unfortunately. But the US have gone for Ainu'u, Toulouse player at Loosehead, who's been stalwart in there, Pifoletti, who is actually on the Saracens books at hooker, Taufatee now a total tight head, confirmed, starting there it seems. Loads of people, as we'll talk about Cian Healy a little later on, loads of people making that jump, and Kanye this week going from loose to tight. It's supposed to be not easy. But I suppose, sometimes you get like a right-handed guy who's thinking to himself, geez, I found myself as a loose head here and I'm pretty good, but I feel like I'm stronger when I got the right arm loose, and then I can go to work that way. But it's interesting to see the changing trends.
New tight heads,
yeah, indeed. And then obviously a lock, they've got Breakley and Civetta, who are big but need to shape up. Kid Canada had ran them ragged and outworked them in that first game, which was a real concern from their point of view, and that obviously can't happen again. But on a more positive note, they have Gurmish, he's fresh off a hat-trick in that back row. Guerra's a very solid player at 7, and Cam Dolan
is their pack leader and spirit animal of this team really as well. He's been awesome for them all year, and he is vital to their chances. He seems to call their line-outs as well, which is completely offsetting that lock department. I'm not sure what those locks do then if he calls the line-out. But
indeed, those guys they push hard at the scrum. Their backline is not ideal because obviously Aj McGinty, who's a real difference maker for the side, missing. He failed a HIA after an illegal tackle he suffered against London Irish at the weekend. And interesting, like his last act, I think, was to convert a try. And that put them, I think, 31-13 up or something. He leaves the field, and then Sale end up drawing the game 31-all. He's arguably the most influential player in that Sale side, which is playing top level Premiership
footy side. So he is a huge asset to them and a major blow. It means that McGee comes in at 10 with I think is Carty covering 10 at the bench.
Correct.
Probably means a lot more will come through to Haas, which, as I've said before, I'm not convinced is a wholly good thing for them. But
he's getting a lot of positive press to Haas. Haas is another guy on the Saracens books of all places. He's obviously in his last game out. He scored a great try on the break.
Kicked a long range
drop goal, and you have the issue, and I have the issue as well. Let's be real, that he's just too slow to clear rucks.
Yes,
and that sometimes people in their evaluation of scrum halves miss the bones of the job.
Fundamental to the task at hand is how quick is his pass. How quickly can he clear a ruck? His passing has to be the first, second, third, fourth choice. And they have great scrum halves like Danny Kerr, who are really good passers, really good runners, not so good at kicking, so you just don't make him kick. Whereas De Haas is just one who sets up a million box kicks, and he's very slow and laboured and deliberate about his pace.
That kind of is this team. I mean, they will be looking to set that slow tempo. The rest of their team, just to finish it off, they've got Bryce Campbell, who's captain, and Lepetti, who's a quality player actually at 13 and could be a difference maker. They've got Cruz on one wing, Christian Dyer from the 7th circuit on the other,
and Bracky at fullback.
Bracky's
a very good player, and the last time he lined out at fullback for them, he took a knock early doors and had to go off, which was a shame because he was actually playing well. There's definitely excitement out there. It's whether they can give those kinds of will they get them involved at all, or will they just be chasing box kicks all day? That's the main issue with the US in general, because
it's not the most distributive centre partnership, and with Will McGee there in a 10, one wonders whether they're going to go wide at all or whether they're going to start to win it up front. As far as the Uruguay squad are concerned, they do have, as you point out, some of the old names. It's still somewhat up in the air as to who or what they'll go for as far as their combinations are concerned. But they will have the return, it looks like, of Santiago Arata, who, by the way, his last game for Cast, who were stuffed at the weekend without him, was a 23-all draw against Bordeaux, and he came on for Rory Cockett when they had a 10-point deficit, changed that game, scored one try, and made another, and then they ended up giving him man of the match off the bench.
He has always been a quality player, and
really
he's a big talisman for this side, so he'll come back in, no doubt.
Keep that US defence honest and try and keep the tempo frantic, and then try and also just attack space wherever it is. And he runs perfect tracking lines as well.
As Canada showed, and they'll fancy their chances of being better at it than Canada even, but they showed in that opening game against them that if you run them ragged, there's definitely chances and gaps that start to appear, and that this US team are not above appearing sluggish when the tempo gets high, and Uruguay will definitely want to do that up at Mile High Stadium in Colorado. There's scope for them to run them, gas them out early doors if they get.
It's not Mile High Stadium, is it?
Is it not Mile High? No, it's Infinity Park, but it's up. It's in Colorado, up in the Rockies, is what I mean.
Because Mile High Stadium is Denver
different.
Stadium,
That's right.
In NFL, no, it's not that.
No, it's not. But in a stadium up high at altitude, it's easy to get guys sucking diesel if you can keep the ball in play and high, like what we were highlighting with the All Blacks. If they can get large sequences, 2.5 minute sequences of kick, return, ball in play, moving it about, and then suddenly a fragmented line. Guys like Berchesi or Freitas will take a line easily, and Arata will pull those strings very well. There's a recipe here for them to find tries against a slightly lumbering big pack in this US team.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've got Berchesi, of course, that out half who's going to return to the squad from France. I believe Kessler as well from hooker, who's a very good player and gotten the end of a few maul tries of his own. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, at the weekend against Argentina 15, they did concede a maul try, which obviously the US will be looking at, but they also generated 4 turnovers from line out mauls in terms of locking up the ball and creating a scrum. That is one of the key areas to look for in this game.
Because the US, it's their main primary weapon in terms of going for tries. They will kick the corner and look to maul you over. They did it in Twickenham at the beginning of the year, or at the beginning of summer. Very impressive to see them do it in the second half in that game. But we saw the week after when they faced Ireland how if you do a bit of homework on them, or if you're a little telegraphed and the defensive team are game for it, you can scupper their chances very early by taking that set piece away from them. So Uruguay managing to do that to Argentina 15, that's encouraging for them. If they can do that here, they'll rock the US if they can't get that set piece motor.
Absolutely, yeah, and they just want to be the more clinical team, the team that puts more points on the board.
This is it. Absolutely.
The real question is whether they're going to gel. Are they going to come in and be a little rusty? There's an unknown element to them. They're not quite as settled as they had been because they have such talent that the French sides, particularly in the Pro 2, but also in the Tucker Tours, are taking you.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, they've had great success since the World Cup, but that can be a blessing or a curse depending on how well you manage to gel the side, because they aren't going to have all those reps with each other, all those minutes with each other, all that squad bonding and understanding that you can develop over a long period as a squad. It is a little more barbarians-y, and hence the offense could either go very well with the talent they have out there or could struggle, and that's where the US can come in, and all of a sudden there's more scrums, there's more lineouts, there's more chances for the US to get on top physically. It's a great big question mark, really, what happens in this game. I was leaning Uruguay going into it, but I think with all that context and the limited game time that they've had in recent weeks, despite they did have those 2 games against Argentina 15, they did have the game against Chile where they were a bit stuttery by their own admission. The question is, are they going to be as good as that team in the World Cup? If they are, if they've kicked on from them, you might back them, but it's definitely up in the air out in Colorado.
It's true. They are. It's a tacit advantage that they're playing this opening leg in North America, and the same is true with Canada. In that, even if they are a little bit stuttery and finding their feet,
they can bring it back to their turf.
They can bring it back to their turf, and as long as they're within touching distance, even a score or 2, because they back themselves to be able to run the ball a lot. But if they can stay in striking distance, they'll feel very confident going back to Montevideo or somewhere to play it next week. So, I don't know how it's going to play out. I expect a little bit of stutteriness, but I don't know necessarily that the US will punish them as clinically as they sometimes they're a little bit off themselves. I wonder who's going to set the tempo. I'm curious about the first scrum, whether they're going to cope with the US scrum, whether they're going to be able to repel the line out maul. I think there's a lot of really interesting little matchups here that will be telling in the end. And
there's certainly a lot of momentum coming out of South America right now.
That's
and
true.
It would be interesting. It's one of the few matchups that we're going to get to see now between South America and someone else that isn't Argentina struggling in the Rugby Championship.
Yeah.
So I'm between 2 minds on which way it'll go, but I think I might be leaning for this one anyway. Maybe not for the tie. We'll have to see how the tie progresses. It's look, we've so little game time watched with these two sides that predictions are always way more just throwing a ballpark answer out there. But I think I'm going to say that the US at home might take this. I think the benefits of the MLR should tell in this game, but that is with the caveat that, you know, if they're too slow and poor and can't move the ball and just end up kicking everything to Uruguay, they could get caught with their pants down very easily.
Yeah, no, there's scope for bang bang try from the Uruguay side easily enough, and we know that. Yeah, I'm gonna flip that. I'm gonna say that I back Uruguay just purely because on a like, with that said, yeah, we haven't got as much tape, so they are just out there predictions, but the way that they play the game, they really they earned so much credit in my book for that Fiji win and creating that pool where every team got a win, which I'm just so giddy off still.
They hustled pretty hard against Wales as well.
They did, you know, they caused them problems as well. And just in terms of the rates of progression, as we were highlighting in some of the other teams as well, like the US have definitely been up and down. They had a great 2018, disappointing World Cup in 2019. They're disappointingly slow in their 15s game, considering what they bring to the 7s game and what you think some of their resources are as far as just surplus to requirement sprinters. They should be a quicker team than they are. I'm a little bit more vexed with where the US are going, and they're definitely one step forward, 2 steps back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and kind of balancing out at kind of staying in the status quo. Whereas Uruguay have racked up some good results before the World Cup, during the World Cup, and after the World Cup, and there's evidence to suggest that there's a progression there rather than a kind of flipping and flopping or even a regression that we've seen with other teams. So I'm going to back them, and couple that with the fact that I like attacking footy. I like what South America are doing. I'm rooting for Uruguay in this one because I want Los Teros at the World Cup. I want no doubt about it. I want them in America's one, and I think they're good value for it. So I hope that they catch the US with their pants down and win the game, even on US soil.
I don't disagree. I think long term the structures that are being put in place in the USA are going to be very difficult to overcome. I think the MLR player base that they're developing is very, very exciting. But it's probably, like, let's be real, watching them at test level, you're feeling at the moment like Gary Gold is wasting the potential of them a little bit. They're a bit too slow, a bit too clunky. Whereas Uruguay, obviously, the limited tape isn't a fault of their own. Their recent consistent pieces of form were in 2019 when they raced through that America's Rugby Championship and swept aside all before them. And then
Fiji.
And then beat Fiji in the World Cup and looked a very, very good side in that tournament. That was a hell of a year for them. Then they didn't get we didn't get a chance to see how they kicked on because of COVID.
Yes.
That came in and stymied everything, and this is probably their first chance to come together since that World Cup. And if they're anything like that 2019 team, they'll move the ball with speed and they'll punish the US for being a little slow.
They'll be better than the US. If it goes to form in that World Cup, the US had very little in that World Cup, whereas the Uruguayans did.
So we'll see.
We'll see. That one takes place this Saturday, but it's well worth the watch. I think World Rugby might be streaming it. I'm not sure if it's going to be on their website or on their YouTube channel as they've been doing, but they are suggesting that they are to watch it live.
I saw one link, but then when they go to their website where they usually advertise it, they don't. I know that Uruguayan fans have been giving out that it's behind a subscription paywall, which is just a hideous way to broadcast rugby in a nation that's developing its rugby fandom. I mean, it's just a gross mistreatment of the fans.
It should be live streamed on Facebook, but
it should be free to air on TV if possible, and if not possible, free to air online. 100%, because the biggest thing more than cheap profits is eyeballs on the game. That's where your long-term gains are. So that is a shame to hear that, but hopefully we have a means of watching these games, because they are going to be, this one in particular is going to be really, really juicy, and it's going to be telling. I think we're going to know a little bit more about the landscape of Tier 2 rugby once this fixture is settled.
I agree.
Thank you very much for watching the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you enjoyed that video, be sure to give it a like, share with your friends, and leave a comment down below as well. We really do want to hear your thoughts.